Back again, a Muslim and an Atheist Breaks Bread podcast. We're watching Did Jesus Go to India? Just in case you missed it. Thanks for the support in the videos. Come, jump back into
The
it.
classical world was more interconnected than most people realize. Merchants from Central Asia took gold and silver from around the Mediterranean and exchanged it for silk and spices from around the Indian Ocean and China. With the spread of goods also comes the spread of ideas and art. The conquest of Alexander the Great spread Greek art into India, resulting in depictions of Buddhist figures and various non-Greek deities posed in the styles of Greek statues. And back west, an ivory statue depicting either the Indian goddess Lakshmi or a Yakshini spirit was found in the ruins of Pompeii, so there was certainly an exchange going on. These known connections have weaved themselves into speculations about the life and nature of Jesus. And in the never-ending quest to fill in the missing years of his biography, some have hypothesized that he traveled to India and studied the teachings of Buddhism and other Indian religions. One of these gap fillers was a 19th century...
Is that meant to be Jesus?
I think so. Looks like some school teacher or something, innit?
Definitely looks like some little Greek boy. That's funny.
The 19th century Russian Jewish adventurer, Nicholas Natovich. According to his own writing, Natovich had traveled to India in 1887, and while there he claims a chief lama from a Buddhist monastery told him of a manuscript about the life of Jesus during the lost years, in which he traveled through India. He found this document in the library of the Hemas monastery and translated it while recovering from an injured leg. The manuscript was titled The Life of Saint Issa, and it contains a number of differences with the story.
How many years? The last years. So how many years? Because I
18.
know he was mentioned at 12
18.
in the Bible, and
18.
18 years. So it's possible, if no one knows where it was, that it was in India.
Well, it's
I'm
the
trying to think,
Bible
what's the
writers
route
that
there?
don't know where he is. It's not, no one knows where he is. But what you do is, like I say, you try and pick up stories from other cultures and and then do the timeline thing. This is a theory again, by the sounds of it, you know.
Yeah.
Contains a number of differences with the stories of Jesus in the Gospels. The first 3 chapters weren't about Jesus, but rather were a retelling of the 5 books of Moses. In this version, Moses isn't an Israelite, but rather a blood relative of the Pharaoh, who lobbied for the freedom of the Israelites, which was eventually granted. We finally get to Jesus in chapter 4, but almost right away we see challenges to Christian orthodoxy. Soon after, a marvelous child was born in the land of Israel. God himself speaking by the mouth of this infant of the frailty of the body and the grandeur of the soul. The parents of the newborn child were poor people, belonging by birth to a family of noted piety, who, forgetting their ancient grandeur on earth, praised the name of the Creator and thanked him for the ills with which he saw fit to prove them. To reward them for not turning aside from the way of truth, God blessed the firstborn of this family. He chose him for his elect and sent him to help those who had fallen into evil and to cure those who suffered. In this version, Jesus isn't the Son of God, but rather a normal person who was blessed by God. We also get a more Unitarian, or more precisely a Jewish interpretation of God in the next verse, which refers to God as one and indivisible. The latter chapters of the life of Saint Issa describe Jesus running away from home around the age of 13 and spending the next 16 years traveling around India and studying their scriptures. Then it was that Issa left the parental house in secret, departed from Jerusalem, and with the merchant set out towards Sin, with the object of perfecting himself in the divine word and of studying the laws of the great Buddhas. He visited the Jains and the burial site of Vyasa, the author of the Mahabharata. There he studied with the Brahmins, who taught him the Vedas and Sutras, as well as the arts of healing and exorcism. Jesus would visit a number of Hindu holy sites, including Rajgir and Varan.
Them Vedas and Sutras, they're like the 2 top castes,
Hindu
and
text.
but they're castes as well, and it like you get Vedas is a caste at the top.
Is it?
Like like, so if you're
Vedas.
100%. They're like the scholars and people who do that. So if they're probably what the text's called, but in the caste system, they're like high in it. So the people who probably read them texts, or the scholars or whatever they are, they're called the Vedas as well, and they get treated like basically.
Varanasi, and spent much time amongst the Shudra, the lowest caste of Indian society. After many years, he began to travel back west towards Judea, visiting Zoroastrian priests in Persia along the way. The Life of Saint Issa doesn't give much detail about exactly what Jesus learned from the Vedas and Sutras or any other Hindu or Buddhist scriptures, because it is too focused on Jesus preaching to the Shudra and castigating the Brahmins for their polytheism, idolatry, and human sacrifice. He inveighed against the act of a man arrogating to himself the power to deprive his fellow beings of their rights of humanity. For, he said, God the Father makes no difference between his children. All to him are equally dear. Issa denied the divine origin of the Vedas and the Puranas, for a law has already been given to man to guide him in his actions. Fear thy God, bend the knee before him only, and bring to him the offerings which proceed from thy gains. Jesus eventually returns to Roman Judea, where he engages in his ministry, and just like the Gospels, he is arrested by the Romans, but the narrative is flipped. In the Gospels, it's the Pharisees who ask the Romans to arrest Jesus, but in the Life of Saint Issa, it's Pontius Pilate who asks the Jewish elders to give them a reason to execute him. At these words, the governor became exceeding wroth, ordering the sentence of death to be passed upon Issa and the acquittal of the 2 thieves. The judges, having consulted together, said unto Pilate, We will not take upon our heads the great sin of condemning an innocent man and acquitting thieves. That would be against the law. Do then as thou will. Saying which, the priests and the wise elders went out and washed their hands in a sacred vessel, saying, We are innocent of the death of this just man. Jesus is crucified by the Romans, but there is no resurrection. After his leg had healed, Notovich returned home to Russia and began a journey to get this manuscript published. He went to the Archbishop of Kiev, but due to censorship laws in Russia, he was encouraged not to publish it. He visited Rome and met with a cardinal, who also told the
Why did he go to the church to publish it? I don't get why. By them accounts, it would mean that everything the church is saying is wrong. In terms of Jewish people not being part of him being crucified, in terms of a lot of things.
Well, they're calling him Saint Issa. Mm-hmm. So it can only go with the church, and that's where the saints are created.
Yeah, but that's what he's saying. Is that what the monks called him? The monks called him a saint, and
which monks?
The monks that he went to visit in India, who had this manuscript.
Oh.
So what I'm saying to you is, if you was writing this book and you knew that it was going to cause bare controversy in the church, why would you go to the church to get it published?
Notovich that he shouldn't publish the manuscript, but offered to buy it from him. He met with another cardinal in Paris, who told him not to publish it out of fear of empowering the growing number of atheists attacking the church. While in France, he met with former Prime Minister Jules Simon, who suggested that Notovich discuss the manuscript with Ernst Renan, a French philologist. Renan told Notovich that he should be given the manuscript to study and write a report on to the Academy, but Notovich didn't like this option either. This proposition, as the reader will understand, was most seductive and flattering, yet I took away the work with me, saying I wished to revise it once more. The fact being that I feared if I accepted this association, I would only receive the bare honor of discovering the Chronicles, while the illustrious author of Life of Jesus would reap the glory of the publication and the commentaries. He eventually published it in 1894 in a book titled The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. The book contains the Life of Saint Issa manuscript along with his account of finding the document and his commentaries on it. The book was quickly translated into French, Italian, German, and English, and it was immediately thrashed by every academic who got a hold of it, pointing out that there was no evidence outside of his book that Jesus was ever in India. Notovich responded by claiming that one of the cardinals he discussed the manuscript with told him that the Vatican had numerous documents verifying Jesus had been to India. When asked to
You know that's true as well, isn't it? You know, like the Catholic Church have got so many documents that nobody's ever seen.
Yeah. Well, they've been running their program for the last 2,500 years, and I'm still going to say the Roman program is just succession from the Greek program.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
India. When asked to name the cardinal who told him this, he refused, claiming that the cardinal would be punished if this information ever got out. So nobody believed him. Or at least nobody believed him that had any education or training in the appropriate fields. The text was and has remained popular with occult groups and others that strayed away from traditional Christianity. The biggest question around Notovich's work now is, Did he make it up, or was he tricked by the monks at the Hemus monastery? There is a lot of evidence that suggests he made the whole thing up just within the text alone. Firstly, the text is divided up into chapters and verses like a modern Bible is. The oldest known copies of the Bible don't have the text subdivided this way. Now, the Bible has always been subdivided into constituent books, but we don't see chapters added until the Middle Ages, and we don't see the chapters subdivided into verses until the Reformation.
I would just see that as him knowing that if he makes it look like the Bible, that's just marketing it. Like, obviously he's seen the Bible. So when he's transcribing it, he's thinking,
breaking it down.
I'm gonna break it down so it's easier for people to digest.
I don't know. It's probably just translation is a discipline on its own, and I don't think formatting would come into that. So you just translate it and then write it.
No, that's marketing on it. It's marketing, though.
Well, when you're translating, you're gonna have to look at words and what they mean and the different meanings and pick and choose in it. So I would imagine you do all of that in one thing and then write it out full hand separately. You get me? So the formatting could be done in the second instance, not the first instance.
Nowhere in the book does Notovich explain why he created the chapters and verses, and it's unlikely that if the life of Saint Issa was real, it would have had them. Another point for the He Made It Up column is how explicit the text is about the nature of God and Jesus. The mainstream view among Christians is that Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit are one deity but three separate persons, usually referred to as the triune God. Then there are those who believe that God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are three separate beings, which can be placed into numerous classifications such as Unitarianism or Arianism, which believe that God the Father is the supreme God and that Jesus is a kind of lesser God. Despite these beliefs being strongly held by their respective branches of Christianity, none of the canonical books of the Bible are as explicit in stating the nature of Jesus and God as the life of Saint Issa. And now, I hate to bring this kind of thing up because when most people do, it's because they are pushing some kind of conspiracy theory, but we have to talk about Notovich being Jewish. Notovich was a Russian Jew born in Crimea. There are questions about his religious affiliations. Some sources I've looked at claim he was a convert to Christianity, which is possible considering all the pogroms that were going on in Russia at the time, but I can't find any primary sources confirming this. Regardless if he did convert, even if only on paper, the details around the trial and crucifixion of Jesus seem a little too convenient for someone putting up with late 19th century anti-Semitism. Isn't just a Unitarian interpretation of God, it's the Jewish conception of God. And the idea that Jesus may have been chosen by God for something important seems to me an attempt at reconciling Judaism and Christianity. Secondly, the life of Saint Issa exonerates the Jews and their role in the crucifixion of Jesus, completely contrary to the gospel narrative. And thirdly, it removes the resurrection of Jesus from the narrative, which is pretty important for Christian theology. And those are just arguments based on the text alone. The material evidence is more damning. One of Notovich's critics, the British
people killed Jesus. Like, even now, do you think that
Jesus has to die in Christianity for Christianity to exist?
So
resurrection,
they did a
no
good
Christianity.
Thing. So they did a good thing.
A good thing? Is it a good thing? No, it's not a good thing. How could, if the Christian theory was right, how could the absence of God be good? If the Christian theory was right, if it's wrong, how can there be any benefit in killing a prophet of God? So.
But I guess if they didn't do that, there'd be no Christians, would there? Everyone
absolutely,
Jewish.
because Christianity hangs on the death of Jesus Christ. If Jesus don't die, no Christianity.
But to be fair, there would have been Christianity because there was Christianity before Christ anyway. As we discovered, so it would have looked different.
This is the consolidation of that.
Yeah. Madness.
The material evidence is more damning. One of Notovich's critics, the British philologist Max Mueller, wrote a letter to the chief lama at the Hemus monastery asking about Notovich's story, and his reply said that no Westerner had visited the Hemus monastery in over 15 years, and that no such document existed. An English professor teaching at the College of Agra, James Archibald Douglas, visited the Hemus monastery to interview the chief lama, and was also told that the manuscript wasn't real. There are also rumors that Notovich admitted to forging the documents, but this is not substantiated either. Now, he could have been lying, but there's also a chance that Notovich was the victim of some practical joke by the monks. There is at least one source corroborating Notovich's time in India. Sir Francis Younghusband, an officer in the British Army, met Notovich at Skardu in Kashmir, so it's possible that Notovich could have visited Hemus. In addition to this, Notovich offered to return to Hemus with a group of recognized Orientalist scholars to examine the documents. If they had taken him up on that offer, it would be pretty embarrassing to be found out like that. However, he could have just as easily been bluffing. The issue gets more complicated when stories of people heading to Hemus later claim to corroborate Notovich's story. His book was mostly abandoned in Europe, but some in India still held on to the story, and one Hindu monk, Swami Abhedananda, visited the monastery in 1922, and claimed to have seen the life of Saint Issa himself, which he republished in his book Journey into Kashmir and Tibet. After his death in 1939, one of his students visited the monastery in order to see the documents, but the Lama told him that they had gone missing. What should be understood is that neither Notovich nor the Swami could read Tibetan, and so neither of them could actually read or translate the document directly, and so they would have had to have one of the monks at the monastery do it. And so I guess it's possible that they could have played this trick twice on tourists, but why would they do that? So I guess the question now comes down to you guys. Do you think this story about Jesus in India was a complete fabrication by Notovich? Or do you think the monks were playing a trick on some tourists? I'm leaning towards the former, but I can see the point of the latter. Now, I make a lot of videos about religion and politics, but I know some of you have a different taste in
speculative, all the way speculative.
Okay. I think obviously when we watch this,